Ow! Let me hear that voice! Ow! This is the S to the K to the double E to the T to the E to the R. I'm sitting next to the G to the Q, and I'm sitting next to Jonathan Cole from TEP, and we're in the house, and we are fired up. Hello, somebody.
Hello, somebody.
Jonathan said hello.
Hello. We're on the air. AM 990 KWAM Talk Radio. This is the Unleashed Voice for the LGBTQ community. And as Davian just said, we have Jonathan Cole in the house from the TEP, Tennessee Equality Project. And before we begin, get into our interview, I just want to inform our listeners, or maybe first-time listeners, what this radio show is all about. The Unleashed Voice radio show is about education, empowerment, and enrichment. It is our hopes that someone is presented with some information while we're on the air that will cause you to ask more relevant questions. And this is our brick to reaching a broader audience and to building a better society that is void of discrimination, prejudices, and inequality. That's what we're about here on the Unleashed Voice radio show. And as we said earlier, one of our guests this evening is Jonathan Cole from the Tennessee Equality Project. And we're going to be diving into the big issue that's been going on in our nation and rocking our nation and setting us up for the right side of history. And it is the argument of the Supreme Court for marriage equality. Jonathan, come on in with us.
Sure. Thank you, Gwen. Thank you, Davian, for having me back. I'm really excited to be here, particularly this week after the oral arguments before the Supreme Court. It's really gratifying to know that Tennessee is going to play a central role in shaping the policy of our nation on marriage. So, yeah, thank you for having me.
Okay.
So what's the latest that's going on with the marriage equality case right now?
Well, they had the oral arguments on Tuesday, and they devoted 2.5 hours to both sides on two important questions that were put before the court. And the nature of the questions are important because that's how they're going to determine how they answer these questions. And the first question is, are states obligated to allow same-sex partners to marry in their state of residence? And then the second question is, do states have to recognize legally performed marriages for same-sex couples in their states if they move from one state to another where it was legal to where it is not? Say, like here in Tennessee, if my partner, my husband and I got married in Massachusetts, but the state of Tennessee does not recognize our marriage. So those are the two questions that the Supreme Court wanted to address with the oral arguments, and so both sides framed their responses to the court in that way.
Well, I'm a little confused because I can understand one of the questions, but the second question is already covered in the Constitution.
Article 4?
Yes.
Yeah, Article 4, full faith and credit clause.
Yes, that's already covered.
Yeah, and some of the discussion there, you get into semantics of law that I'm not terribly familiar with, because I do need to state, I study policy a lot in the law, but I am not an attorney, so I can't give any legal opinions, just opinions. But yeah, it's one of those things where states routinely recognize marriages from other states, except when it comes to same-sex marriage.
Exactly, it's in there, and they also recognize your driver's license, business license, and you transfer things over. So these things are that the state has been mandated to do, and was written a long time ago. But from the argument that in my research, it was the rulings were each state, changing their state constitution, which from my understanding still should not supersede the federal constitution,
Right.
the federal law.
Right.
And in those instances, they have done that. And up until this point, no one has been in a position to fight or as it is now. And those fights were relatively small. It wasn't an uprising, almost the whole country standing up and rallying for the cause. And now that's what you see from coast to coast.
Yeah.
And it's just not one individual challenging the state. You know,
Right.
It's been done in a much broader spectrum. And I thought that was very interesting that they want to argue that they don't have to accept the license even if you go out of state and get it.
Yeah, and there's actually two parts of the Constitution that are at play here. In addition to Article 4, with the full faith and credit clause, you've got the 14th Amendment, which calls for equality, and that people be treated equally. And so, a person who moves from one state to another should have their marriage license honored and recognized. They should be treated the same as anybody else who has a marriage license that moves from one state to another.
Well, one of my biggest arguments for that, the state position, especially the state of Tennessee, my home state, is that if you say that I'm not entitled to all of the rights of a citizen of this state, then there should be some things that I'm not required to do.
Right.
As a citizen of the state.
Right.
There should be some things that I should not be required to do. My taxes should be reduced.
Right. We should have a card that we carry when we go make purchases so that we're exempted from sales tax.
Yes.
Seriously.
That should be a rainbow card.
Yeah.
It should be a rainbow card of the colors, whereas I can let you know that I'm not required to do this because I'm not a full citizen. And I mean, and I think what you will probably have, which I read the article of the guy from Nashville that's moving. It was very moving. He's an activist in Nashville, Michael, and you said you knew him.
Yeah, Michael Newgard, yeah.
Yes, and he's moving from Tennessee.
He is.
And that's probably what you would see happening.
Yeah, it requires a strong stomach to be an advocate in the state of Tennessee and other southern states because on a number of fronts, progressive voices for equality are met with opposition. So it's a hostile climate. So it takes a strong stomach to do this kind of work.
Well, you have to remember, in 1967, they had the case of Loving versus Virginia, the interracial marriage case. And so only a small majority of people supported that.
Right.
And it was ruled in the favor that interracial marriages were legal in America. So I think the good thing about it is that the small minority group that we're part of are in support of same-sex marriages. And so I think we're on good ground. It's going to get a little hard. Like Dr. King says, it's going to be some difficult days ahead. Right. But it's going to be worth the fight. And so we got to continue to stay encouraged and stay hopeful. And I think everything will be okay.
Well, actually, I think it's a larger number supporting the marriage, same-sex marriage, from 1990 up until 2015. It was a swing. It was a swing in a couple of states that they didn't vote for it in the first election, and then it came up again 4 years later, and it was overturned. It was overturned in a couple of states.
The state of Maine.
Yeah, the attitude that I've seen, I think, is more support than it was in 1967 for interracial marriage.
Right.
And one thing that I know that you have to understand that all people are not going to change their mind.
Right.
And it's just some people that just they'll never change their mind. It's some people right now that's still against interracial marriage.
Exactly.
They will not change their mind. It's segregationists, they're racist. They just won't change their mind, and that's fine.
Right.
And you just have to understand that no matter what decision is made by the Supreme Court, somebody's going to be unhappy.
Right. Yeah, and one of the things I think is really critical to the opposition making their case is they have to show that there's some harm in allowing equality in same-sex relationships for marriage. And they really can't demonstrate that. They can't show that there's any harm to anyone because, they talk about, well, marriage is for procreation. We've always defined marriage as between one man and one woman. And that tradition argument was also used in Loving versus Virginia. But that's what many of the judges were saying. The justices were asking. It's like, what else do you have? And they got nothing. So
Hillbill is extreme as well. Take that, hold that thought, Jonathan. We're going to take a pause for the calls. This is KWAM 990, the Unleashed Voice, and we're here talking about marriage equality, and we'll be right back after the break. Stay with us.